Lesson 3.1, Multiplication Properties. Before we look at any of the properties, I want to talk to you about this vocabulary term, and that is factor. Remember when we did addition problems, each number was called an addend? In this case, each number is called a factor. So a factor is the name of each number in a multiplication problem. And if you remember, a factor times a factor equals a product. All right, let's get to the properties. The first two properties you've seen before, commutative and associative. So let's go through them. Instead of the commutative property of addition, now we have multiplication. And it says that the order of each factor can be changed and the product will still stay the same. So the example of that would be 2 times 8 times 5 is equal to 5 times 8 times 2. Notice how in the first one the 2 is in the front, and then in the second one it's in the back. I can change that for any reason, because remember, in order of operations we start from left to right. So 2 times 8 is 16. You might not know that then 16 times 5 is 80. But if you look over here, you probably know 5 times 8 is 40. And I bet you'll know that 40 times 2 is 80. So by switching the numbers around, it makes our multiplication a little bit easier. I love the commutative property. Now let's look at the associative property. You won't see this as often, but it kind of has very similar characteristics. But instead of just switching the order, we switch the grouping. So the grouping of factors can be changed and the product will still stay the same. So if I have 2 times 3 times 5, 2 times 3 is 6, 6 times 5 is 30. I could change it to be 2 times 3 times 5. 3 times 5 is 15, 15 times 2 is 30. So that's another property, commutative and associative. And now we come to one that all of you probably know, but just might not know there's a name for it. It's the identity property. The identity property is a number times 1, any number times 1 is itself. So 243 times 1 equals 243. 1,760,000 times 1 is 1,760,000. It works for any number. And also the zero property. Any number times 0 is 0. So 151 times 0 equals 0. Let's do some practice now. I'm going to show you 4 problems. Each one of these shows a different property. Pause the video and see if you can figure out which property goes with which problem. All right, let's see if you are correct. 24 times 3 equals 3 times 24. That goes back to the commutative property. And you can see we can switch the order. 2 times 8 times 5 equals 5 times 8 times 2. We flipped the 2 and the 5. In here, we just flipped them just like that. Number 2 is 13 times 0 equals 0. That's the 0 property. 2 times 5 times 6 equals 2 times 5 times 6. We just move the grouping, and if you remember, that's called the associative property. And then the last one, 71 times 1. Anytime a number times 1, it's the answer is itself, the product. So that's the identity property. For these next 4 questions, I want you to fill in the square. So let's show you these 4. How would we pause the video and see if you can figure out what would be in those squares? All right, let's check your work. 9 times 2 times 3 would equal 2 times 3. Notice they're in a different order, but the commutative property says that all of those numbers have to be the same. They can just be changed. So what number haven't we used yet here? Oh, we haven't used the 9, because there's the 2's, there's the 3's. So this one has to be 9. This next one, 52 times blank equals 0. Well, the only way I can get 0 as my product is if I multiply by 0. So that's going to be the 0 property. And look, there's my answer, 0. Number 7, blank times 1 equals 915. Well, if I remember back to the identity property, any number times 1 is itself. So in this case, the answer must be 915. And the final one, 13 times 2 times 5 equals 13 times blank times 5. Well, all the numbers are still in the same order, right? There's just a blank here. So that blank would be whatever is in that same spot right there, and it's a 2. So my answer is 2. If you have any questions, please look through the properties in your book for section 3.1, and make sure you join me for a small group. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you tomorrow.